Well, welcome to the new Mawson living quarters. And here's one of our huskies, Vito, just to greet you. Okay, well that's Vito. Now we'll go upstairs to have a look at the new dog display up here. Walking through the lounge here, into the far room at the northern end of the building, called the gallery. John Holshin, I was the coordinator for this display, and it came about from after '92 when I was here as a wintering ACS electrician, and I was a very keen person running the dogs, and from a lot of us who wanted to keep some of the history of the dog sledging era. After the dogs were removed, most of the dogs were removed late that year and taken to Minnesota, and then the last dogs were taken away last December from here. It's now February the 23rd when this display was opened. That's February 23rd, 1994. So this is it. I can take you through a few of the items in the display. And it's here to depict basically items of dog sledding and history of it. There's certainly more that can be added, and I had to put together things as I knew from when we last used the sleds and some of the equipment back in '92 for the long trips. But for example, here we have the Mawson sled, which we used on the 1992 and the last Clara run, where we went to Clara, 300 kilometres to the west, to do emperor penguin census. And so this is packed basically as we took it on that trip. And as you can see, it's quite a full sled, well laden with lots of bits and pieces, which are quite essential for the trip. The sled itself is built in Tasmania. Some of the earlier sleds were built in New Zealand, and this sled was sent down here in parts in 1990 and put together late that year and taken on the '91 trip. Then we took it on the '92, and it hasn't been modified since then, since the trip. And as you can see, it's still got some repairs which were made actually on our 1992 Clara dog journey. As you may see here, we have a splint which was put on at a Broker Island. To Clara, this runner, it was cracked, as you can see the split here, and also this bridging piece here suffered some damage. So we had to repair the sled. We still had over 400 kilometres to travel, and so the sled had to come in out of the bad weather and very cold weather at that time of year and put into a tent so that the repairs could be made. This splint here, we had many splints and bits and pieces with us so we could make repairs, and it was fastened with these screws from underneath and made good, and it survived. It got us out to Clara and back again. So that's a good thing to have as a historical value on a sled like this. A bit more about the sled and pieces on it. At the back here, this is where one dog person will stand as a brake boy, and he'll be getting commands and signals from the person running the dogs. People usually alternate every couple of minutes. So he stands up there. This is the back deck and handlebars here, handlebar box. And we had VHF communications between the two sleds. So this radio here we had on each sled, but because of the temperatures down around minus 30 degrees, the batteries wouldn't last very long in that temperature. So in order to keep them charged, we fitted solar panels to the sleds. As you can see here, there's one there. It's up quite upright. Well, it's at about 40 degrees, so it cops more charge from the sun. And of course, this is the way you'd have it heading in the westerly direction. When we got to Clara, we lifted the panel off, undid a few screws, turned it around, and we're right to come back to Mawson then. So also on the sled we had a few other things. We stacked a cook box and the fuel bottles here, and then we had a drink bottle which we made up for this trip in '92. Very thirsty work running the dogs, especially for 8 or 9 hours a day, and you can certainly lose a lot of fluid. So to replace that, we had these drink bottles which could contain 3 litres of water or orange juice, hot orange juice. They were insulated. There's insulation in there to stop them from freezing, and we have this silicone rubber tube where we could get a drink, we could suck it out whilst on the sled or just walking beside it. So that was very handy. We didn't have to stop and to have a brew out of the thermos. So that was one of the innovations which we made for this trip. Sledging boxes, in those would be packed the pemmican at the bottom, our own personal bags in this one, so we could actually get access to that during the day on the sled, on the run. This one would have other equipment such as HF radio, first aid kits, things like that, and maybe tent pegs, and all the food and other essential equipment in this sledging tank, a canvas tank. The tent, the polar pyramid, was stowed on top. It wasn't folded. It was a folding type, but we didn't fold it because it's very hard to put the tent together in these cold conditions. It can ice up, the poles can ice up, so it was stowed on top and strapped down with these 3 straps. We made these straps up, actually they were made up a bit earlier, I think about 85, 86, and they're very good. They're easy to use when you had mitts on. So we wanted things so that are easy to do in the cold temperatures. So that's about it for the sled, and we'll get on to a bit more of the display. This bag, finally donated by Australia Post, was used to carry our night span and our pegs, so that when we got to a campsite at night we quickly unhitched it off the sled, we could carry it out and peg out the dogs. Inside here we keep our span, wire span with swivels, chains and dog clips for each dog to be put out, and also some pegs in there. So we'll move on now to what I have here. This is the actual trace. We ran the dogs, ran 9 dogs mainly on their long trips, and we ran them in tandem formation, which means side by side in a line, a centre line, with one lead dog out the front. So that trace is attached to the front of the sled, and that's what keeps us all hooked up. So that's it for the sled now, and we'll get on to some photos. Okay, well this is a technical drawing of a Mawson dog sledge, and all the parts there are labelled, so it's easy to follow for people who want to know a bit more about the dog sled itself. I'm moving up here is an earlier photo taken in 1977, where they used to run dogs using a fan trace, different to the way we ran the last sort of 10 years or so with the centre line. And as you can see there, a lot of dogs. There was actually 12 dogs in that fan formation. Fan formation was good in that the dogs could actually run with the ones that they liked to, and after the dogs got used to it, it wasn't too much of a problem to stop once or twice a day and actually untangle them all. But as you can see, if you look through the dogs there, you can see they look like brothers running together, because they want to run with each other like that. Picture along, and it's the one I took as we crossed the Edward VIII Gulf going to Clara in 1992. On that morning there was a little bit of drift blowing, and it was quite a journey across the Gulf. That's Mark Condy, who was my partner, running with our 9-dog team. The Mawson to Clara dog journey map I produced in conjunction with Paul Munro, who did the really nice writing there, and it depicts the route we took and where we stopped and the dates which we stayed at the different campsites along the way to Clara and back. The way the trip worked was that 4 of us went to Clara from Mawson, so we left Mawson and we travelled 300 kilometres to Clara Rookery, and then we returned with the 2 9-dog teams back here to Fold Island, to the northwestern tip called Cape Wilkins. At Cape Wilkins, which is depicted in this photograph here, we were met with 2 Haglins and the changeover party of 4 dog runners. That took, our route basically took 19 days, and then the 4 other people got the dogs and they travelled in the next week back to Mawson. So we travelled slightly different routes on each inward and outward leg. And some of the photos here are there basically to depict the campsites and some of the terrain which you would encounter down the coast towards Clara. Some of these places may not be seen very much in the future, so I thought it was a good idea to include some of these photographs for people just so they get a picture of what it is like down to the west of us a bit. Here was taken by Christine McConnell, and it was the return of our dog trip to Clara. As you can see, the dogs running in across Horseshoe Harbour, the fuel farm there with the Mawson sign painted on it, and yeah, lovely shot by Christine. Just going up here a bit now. Sometimes when they're running dogs, it's not always so much fun, and the dogs weren't always playing the game, and we often had some fights to talk about. On a big trip like the Clara trip, it was really good. The dogs settled down well, and over that whole trip there was probably only about 2 dog fights, small skirmishes. But as you can see, they're going in hell for leather, and the guys certainly got their hands full trying to untangle that mess. Okay, well, we'll travel up here now. It's just a picture of a dog called Whiskey, and you can see there a block of pemmican. He's a mean looking mother old Whiskey. Big dog, probably around about 45 kilos. Okay, going down now. 1993, there were 6 dogs left here after the 22 younger ones departed in November 1992, and in that last year these dogs were all older, so 7-8 years of age, but in that time they were kept in pretty good health. One dog, Maury, couldn't spend the year on the trace running with the others, but the other 5 dogs were able to make up a team and do good trips. They went down to Colbeck, a good feed going down there. Colbeck's over 80 k's away, and up to the mountains, Fang Peak, and also used, as we show here on the bottom left, this photo depicts where they were used along with a man-hauling team to raise money for community aid abroad. So that was a good thing that was done in the final year of the dogs. A picture of Brendan, that's up here above the door. Brendan was the last husky to live and die here at Mawson, and it's a wonderful shot there taken by Ian Raymond. And when the last 6 dogs departed Mawson, each were made of polar metal here on station, and even though Brendan died a week before departure date, he was still given a polar medal, and that was strapped to his collar, which was tied around a flag, and he was wrapped in the flag and departed on the helicopter, and we'll see that photo a little later. The post came up with 4 stamps depicting the last huskies, and on the 13th of January 1994 they were released on the market in Australia. And thanks to the Dubbo and Kingston post offices, who were kind enough to donate this poster and the postcards, which I've also placed on there, and the first day cover there, we now have this lovely poster on display here at Mawson. There's another little folder just down below it depicting the story behind the dog's removal and some of the shots there with the dogs and dog searching. The most famous dogs in the last decade, his name's Nugus, and he was a lead dog here for many years. In the late 70s, the Mawson bloodlines were starting to become a little bit inbred, so there was an exchange of dogs between Australian and the New Zealand bases, and Nugus came from the New Zealand base called the Scott base. So he came over. When he died in 1986, along with a few other dogs that year that were culled, they were sent back to Kingston, and they were put in the freezer there. And last year when I went back, I inquired about getting a couple of dogs taxidermied for our display here, and Nugus was one of them. So this is Nugus now, and he lives on at his old home here at Mawson. He's depicted here in a stance, basically after a run, as he was lead dog. He's still got the harness on, and he's just been fed a block of pemmican. Thank the Queen Victoria Museum, the curators there, Ian Norton, the taxidermist, and for the great help in the great way they've presented these dogs for us here at Mawson. They've done a fine job. I thank them very much. Here, and have a look at the display cabinet. The display cabinet, along with the other furniture here, was made at Asset Services in Hobart, and they've done a fine job. Our station carpenter, Peter Ormson, was a great help in assembling this for us. And we'll just go through some of the equipment stored and housed in here. So, starting up here, we have a non-slip dog harness. Some of the dogs are really cheeky and they could easily get out of their harnesses by backing out of them and slipping them over the head. So that's when these other straps, this back strap could go around their girth behind their front legs, and that would stop that. So that's a dog harness. All the dog harnesses were made here on site at Mawson in the sewing room using lamp wick. That's the fabric. Going down we have some McRobinson's chocolate, and McRobinson's were a good sponsor of Inari in the early days, and that's actually how McRobinson Land was named in their honour. Just coming forward now, we have a collar. It was Bear's collar, and it's a choker collar. We use the webbing for the choker collars in preference to the chain, because the chain would increase the amount of wear on their hair and skin, so chokers weren't so bad if they're made out of webbing. Coming along, the famous sledging biscuits, which were always carried in the ration packs. The original formula was developed by Philip Waugh in the early days of habitation here at Mawson. And behind that we have a sledge runner keel. The keel was used, it was mounted on a sledge runner in the centre of the sledge runner, and the keel could slide down and up, and when it was slid down and located there, it was used to preventing any side slipping when traversing along an icy slope. So that's the keel runner. And along here, lots of dog clips have been used right through the years until the latest ones, which we used in 1992. Behind them was some of the swivels which were used on the chains, on the dog's chains, and there's an actual bull ring which was also used on the running traces to link up the chains. Moving up there, we have some of the implements used for cutting up seals. Seals were butchered here up until 1985, and they were good food for the dogs. Sealing stopped then, but some of the implements are still here. Baling hook, chopper, some fencing knives, sharpener. A dog harness up here, similar to the other one, without the retarding strap. A leather dog collar. Coming down to a pistol, a station pistol, Smith & Wesson 38. This pistol was kept here, and it was used for hunting seals along with the 303 rifle, and also for putting down dogs. Dogs had to be kept down to a certain number, so the older dogs or unused dogs or unwanted dogs were put down in the early days with the Smith & Wesson. In the last few years of dog sledding, we found that lether barb, an injection lether barb, was a better method. Over here is the Very pistol, the Very signal flare pistol, and one of the cartridges. They were used for signalling to another party your location, whether it be for verification or emergency. That was usually carried on dog sleds. Coming down from that now, we have some Bovril pemmican. This was a human pemmican formulated for use as rations on the field trips, especially in the 50s and 60s. Bovril pemmican is the dog pemmican box, pen box, and there was two types, two sizes which we kept here on station. One was on the right hand side, the 900 gram block, which was used in the field. Usually the dogs got fed one block per day as their field ration. And to the left of that is the 600 gram block, which was what they were fed here on base. That was usually because every day with the dogs be run, they didn't need as much food. The diet varied through the year depending on the conditions and the dog's use. So that's the display case, and up above them we have two photos depicting some early traverses across the Amory ice shelf and inland from Mawson. As you can see there on this photo, the fellows have pulled up for a brew, probably the middle of the day brew, and the dogs have decided it's time for a park up as well. And over here it was taken on the Amory ice shelf traverse. You can see the odometer wheel behind the sled, and you can see off in the distance there's a fellow who would ski up the front and scout the way, usually have a compass with him, take some fixes, and then one fellow would look after the dog teams and bring up the cargo to the rear. Well, down below the display cabinet we have some bookshelves here. In those we contain the dog logs, a photo album, any information about dogs, videotapes, and some books all about dogs, dog sledding down here. So good historical archives there for people to meander through. Over this wall now we have some lovely sketches done here at Mawson depicting the dogs on the line, a couple of dogs in harness there. And now some more photographs. Here's the husky pups. An early photo taken in 1969. And they're certainly great to have around. Lots of fun with the husky pups. Moving on to the next shot now. It's an early photo taken in 1955. A couple of the long-haired dogs, which are head net, and in the background is the Gister Dan. Now it's feeding time. Early days, see the weasel in the background there. They would have been being fed lumps of seal meat, and the dogs just really loved it. There was exchange of dogs for breeding and also for goodwill, and in 1983 when the Russians visited, the people of Mawson presented the Russian party with Snoopy. One of the videos that we had here at Mawson playing, this is the last husky. There's also another video called Ready Boys Mush, which was made in 1986 by Bernie Sorensen. So enjoy a little bit of the video presentation here of the last husky. This was taken out at Fold Island where the census was done on the way back from Clower in 1992. Some of the emperor penguins. Now I'll move on to the last set of photographs. This is the last dog run in Horseshoe Harbour on December the 15th, 1993. As you can see, there was a lot of participants. Big fill up for that. Next photo depicts Brendan, who was one of the last 6 remaining huskies. Brendan died a week before departure, and the helicopter is there waiting to take him along with the other dogs out to the Aurora Australis, which is on the ice edge. And there's one of the dogs, Wolf, being carried by Chris Stevenson into the chopper, ready for departure. And the last one is the farewell to the huskies. A big turn up to farewell the dogs and the wintering crew. And you can see the affection displayed towards the dogs by some of the station members. They're certainly missed. This is the history of the Mawson dogs in this chart and how they've been bred throughout the years since coming from Heard Island in 1954. That's the breeding lines there. Well, that concludes my little talk and presentation about the Mawson permanent dedication to the Huskies. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed putting it all together. And I'd certainly like to thank a lot of people who've helped out, a lot of people at the division, Rob Easter, Ellen Barrett, the people at the Queen Victoria Museum. They were wonderful. Linda Clark, Elsmith Wishart, Ian Norton for the taxidermy. People here on station, almost everyone on station has helped in some way or other. And I'd just like to thank Antarctic Division for providing the funds, and for Asset Services for putting it on their program and enabling me to come down and put this together. So that's it. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.